Hi there guys, and welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be talking all about what are the best exercises for your back pain and sort of breaking it down. I hope you find today's video really useful, and if you do, remember, please consider to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, share this with other people that might find it useful, and with that being said, let's get straight into today's live stream. So, which are the best exercises for back pain? We're going to be talking about this today. It's something that we think can be helpful because a lot of patients are maybe doing the wrong sorts of exercises for the stage of recovery they're in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about identifying your needs, a little bit of almost self-diagnosis. Now, no, you're not diagnosing, on the level that we would in the clinic, but just having a better understanding, just sort of three simple questions or ways of understanding your back pain to then know which exercises you should be going down. And then I'll talk about those sort of three different categories later on in the video. And hopefully you can use this to match yourself up to the right sort of workout for you. If you're in our Back in Shape membership site, then you'll already know which exercises you should be doing for which phase. But if you're not, and you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, then hopefully you'll find this video really helpful. And if you've got any questions, as always, as we're going through these videos, then please do put those comments in the comment section below. Lara's behind the camera, so she's looking at your comments on YouTube and Facebook, so she'll be able to read those out as we get towards the end of the live stream and do our Q&A. So with that being said, I've got a reasonably blank screen today, mainly because most of it is just sort of talking to you guys and helping you understand. Now, there are different stages, and we break this down into three stages. They correspond to the three phases that we talk about in the membership site, so for getting your back fixed at home. But the first phase is you can't get out of bed. Your back's gone again. Maybe it's putting your socks on this morning or from doing some gardening yesterday. Back's in a lot of trouble. You're not really able to effectively move around the house the way in which you'd like to. Maybe you're stuck downstairs, can't go upstairs. And the main objective here, or the main thing to understand, is that something down here has been injured. It's been injured maybe relatively recently. It may be an ongoing injury, something that's a chronic, but a more recent flare-up of that same injury. So you've twisted and you've kind of ripped the scab a little bit and things are flaring up again. And the last thing you want to do at this stage is go for a run or something like that, because that is going to make things substantially worse. So we need exercises that can really focus to the needs at this point. And this first point, we need to take pressure off those injured structures. We need to get inflammation under control, because an excess or ridiculous amount of inflammation will lead you to doing the wrong sorts of things. So what are those wrong sorts of things? One of the common things you get is, as we've said many times before, the nerves, as they exit the spine on the back here, they come through these small holes. And sometimes you wake up in the morning and you can't straighten up because the inflammation has built up in this region overnight. And by straightening up and making that little hole small back to its normal size again, that exerts just too much pressure on that nerve and you just can't stand up straight. So we need to get a way to reduce that inflammation first and foremost. We'll come back to this later. Now, the second sort of stage is that actually you're able to move around. And this is probably the difference between that first stage, phase one, and that second stage, phase two, is probably the most misunderstood, especially I would say in those that are a little bit older. Sometimes those that are a little bit younger tend to progress through and have other sorts of issues. But really for those that are a bit older or maybe have a longer history, they really do get stuck in phase one when they should be in phase two. Now, what would correspond to phase two? If you're able to move around the house, yes, you've still got back pain, of course, but you're able to move around the house. Maybe you can have a 15-minute walk outside, but it does bother your back afterwards. That's the sort of person that really needs to consider phase two, or doing an amalgamation of the both. Some very, very simplistic exercises, but something to start to strengthen that body up so it's more resilient to the load of gravity, and so that it can protect this little section here whilst the natural recovery process is taking place. You've got to remember that when the recovery process is taking place, your body is essentially breaking down and rebuilding those soft tissues along force lines so that the tensile strength, the resilience of those tissues can start to return. So that's a really important principle to understand. And then the third phase. The third phase is the otherwise healthy individual. Maybe you're able to go for long walks. Right now it's lockdown, so you're able to do an hour walk, 2 hour walk. Your back bothers you, it's annoying, it aches, and it maybe aches first thing in the morning and you're a bit stiff, or it it bothers you a little bit later on in the day and it's uncomfortable, it affects your ability to comfortably watch TV in the evening or something like that. But otherwise, you're kind of able to do more or less everything. But there are certain physical activities. Maybe you can't go for a run, but you're pretty mobile. You're not limited in any serious way, but the back pain is bothering you and it's quite chronic. And actually, some patients get just as equally depressed in this category as those that are in the more severe category, if not more, because you've just almost got that brake, that limiter. It's like those cars, the trucks on the road that can only drive at 60, and then everyone's driving past you at 70 on the motorway, and you're there going, I just can't get any faster, I can't get that speed up. Well, that's sometimes how those people feel, and they feel, can be a little bit depressed. So if this is you, the real steps you need to take is moving into those phase 3 exercises. And I'll go back through the different phases now, so you can understand what does a workout in that phase look like, because there are lots of different exercises that people in each of those phases could do, but they're not necessarily good. So going back to phase 1, where you're struggling to get around the house, this first stage of back pain, what exercises should you be looking at? Well, the first exercises you should be considering are ones which are very minimal and helping you re-engage your core, start to control that midsection again so we can protect the spine from further damage. So a lot of people, the reason you've injured your back in many cases is that there's that lack of corset-like stability and protection through that midsection, and therefore that leaves the lower back vulnerable. You can't move around without it putting pressure on that injured structure. The next one is making sure your hips are mobile. A lot of people, because of the nature and the way in which we live, even before sort of the coronavirus pandemic, the way in which we lived before was bad, let alone now when many people have been stuck in the house for many weeks now, not moving enough. We get immobility and stiffness in the hip joints. And those hip joints are very stable in many ranges. You can see this ball and socket is rammed right up in there. And in all ranges, it's very strong. Unlike the spine, which as the joints move out of alignment either way, they start to become a little more vulnerable. So having good flexibility through this hip is really important to improve the work the hip does on ranges of motion, so your lower back doesn't have to do as much movement in that time frame. Then the final one is some relief-based stretches. Now this would be, we always recommend that lumbar decompression stretch. There are some caveats of a very small number of people that may need to leave this one out, and that would be someone with a sort of grade 2 spondylolisthesis. If you have these, comment them in the section below if you're concerned. But if you've got general spondylosis, disc degeneration, herniated discs, bulging discs, then this stretch is perfectly fine. In actual fact, it's indicated you should be doing this stretch. So don't be concerned. The vast majority of you will be able to do this lumbar disc stretch, and that's that one with that towel underneath your lower back. Because what that's doing is it's taking pressure off. Now you'll see other decompression stretches for people in this phase, which are not actually working correctly, and those would be hugging the knees and those sorts of things. We want to avoid flexion at all costs. And if you want more content around what you should be avoiding at this stage, then please do put that in the comments below, as we can always do more detailed videos on what to avoid, because also avoiding the bad things is really important. The important thing I want to get across to you guys on stage 1 or phase 1 is that you're not making any improvement. You're not strengthening anything. You're reducing inflammation. Your symptoms will go down, but nothing. You are no more protected or safe after phase 1 as you were before. You maybe have a bit of knowledge, and if you're in the membership site, then you will definitely have a bit more knowledge on things to avoid and how to conduct yourself correctly for your back. But your body is no stronger, and that's a very important thing, because we don't want you lolling into that false sense of security. And sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, people who've had chronic back pain and are a bit more apprehensive about doing more physical exercise get lulled into this false sense of security that phase 1 exercises do actually feel quite good. They reduce your levels of pain, and you think you can just keep doing those, and that's not the case. You have to move on to phase 2. Now, phase 2 exercises, this is the person that you can move around. Maybe you can do a 15-minute walk with a bit of trouble outside of the house, but your back pain is bothering you and definitely limiting your day-to-day activities. And this is about starting to incorporate some sensible strengthening exercises. Here, we want to stimulate those muscles to start them, placing a bit of demand on them, the core muscles, the leg muscles, the middle and lower and upper back muscles, to start to challenge those in very simplistic bodyweight only exercises, exercising a good degree of control of the core throughout all of these exercises. And that's fairly simplistic. That phase can take you a month, maybe 2 months, sometimes a little bit longer, depending on your own preferences and how quickly you choose to progress and push yourself on. But those exercises need to be quite simple, and there needs to be a steady but slow improvement or increase in the intensity that you're using. And that's quite simple there. You can always intersperse some of those phase 1 type exercises for relief to help make sure that as you're strengthening things up, you don't overdo it too much, but you must focus on strengthening once you're able to move around, because inevitably, or it's very, very likely that the reason you got the back pain in the first place is you just don't have that muscular stability and protection for your back, apart from in the very small set of circumstances where it's a one-off instance that has caused the pain. And a one-off instance of picking up a sock or putting your socks on does not constitute a one-off instance. If you've injured yourself doing something very insignificant, like a little bit of light gardening, or picking a sock on, or picking up, your newborn baby, that would not constitute what I would class as a one-off instance. If you've injured your back doing that, you have most likely some more underlying issues that are relevant. I'm talking about the guy that was maybe using a harness in a construction site to carry the weight, and the harness failed and his back got nailed by a big piece of equipment. That is the kind of person that's had a serious back injury, a one-off incident, or a person who's been in a car accident. If you've just flared your back up or injured your back doing something very quote-unquote insignificant, then there's going to be some sort of longer-standing issue there that you may not have been aware of. So it's important to recognise the very clear difference between a one-off instance of back pain and something that will have had a longer history. Our bodies are remarkably robust, and they don't fail for little things unless there's something else going on in the background. Now, that third phase of people where you're actually able to do a lot, but that back pain is nagging you, here we need to employ resistance. We need to use things like resistance bands, a little bit easier to control the weights or control the level of exertion on those muscles. Or we can use things like kettlebells or barbells or other forms of normal free weights to allow our body to start to be challenged in much more advanced ways. And in this case, it's about choosing the right exercises for you. And when you're starting these workouts, not pushing yourself too hard and adding too much. These people tend to add the kitchen sink to their workouts, do it really intensely, and then crash because of the overstress, rather than going through a slow and steady progression in exercises. So that might be using resistance bands to load up the muscles when you're doing, say, some rows, or it might be that you're using a kettlebell to do some lunges, etc. In this more advanced stage of recovery, it's just about building the tolerance of those muscles. So for you, it might be maybe you're doing you're able to do a 20 kilo deadlift and building that up to 30, 40, 50 kilos or more. If you're an active younger or even middle-aged person, that would be appropriate. But it's all about understanding which exercises you should be doing. And we can, by all means, shoot a separate video on which exercise you should be doing in phase 3 and phase 2. Most of you guys watching this are more likely to be in phase 2 and phase 1. So let us know in the comments if you would find that helpful. So I'll just run through this one more time just to recap everything for you guys. First and foremost, identify where you are. Are you unable to move out of the house? That's phase 1. Are you able to move around a little bit, maybe 15-minute walks, that sort of thing, but not too far? Then you're going to be starting in phase 2 with some simplistic exercises. Or are you actually very, very active, but your back pain is just constantly bothering you day in, day out, or on and off all the time, and you need to work on strengthening things in a sensible way, avoiding sort of high-impact exercises, focusing on control, and then building out more exercises with compound movements to provide stability to your back. Find out which one you're in, and then start at that point. It's no good if you're able to move around the house and outside, starting with phase 1, because you really should be moving on to a phase 2 type exercises. And if you're actually able to do lots of stuff, it's definitely no good you being in phase 1. If you're able to run around, that sort of stuff, but your back bothers you, then you really need to be looking at something like phase 3 to actually really make the improvement that is necessary. Because a lot of people can get into a bit of a rut when they've got back pain that's not going away. And a lot of times it's just needing that extra guidance to point that effort and intensity in the right direction so that you can really get results. So that's pretty much it from me today. Let's move over to Q&A.
Okay, great. Ollie has asked a question. I've pelvic tilt and knee.
Yep.
Are both of these any good?
They're good for us because they get us patience because they don't work. So that would be knee hugging, pelvic tucks. So we've discussed this numerous times before on the live streams that knee hugs and these pelvic tucks are basically flattening the lordosis. The reason that they feel pleasant at the time is because they open out these little holes. But if you've seen any of our live stream videos, you'll know that that is it's like scratching yourself after you've been stung by stinging nettles. It's only making the situation worse. And a lot of people actually that have joined the membership site on backinshape.com, have said to us that they were doing these exercises, and it's really quite a paradigm shift to then go and look and say these aren't actually appropriate. And then when they do the right exercises that we recommend, they start doing a lot better. So any sort of hugging the knees, rocking on your back, pelvic tuck exercises, in many, many cases of people with lower back problems, and almost certainly if you've got any sort of disc problem, spondylosis, or sort of degenerative disc disease, those are not going to be helpful for dealing with the situation effectively for the long term. Although they might provide you with moment-to-moment relief, that moment-to-moment relief is at the expense of your long-term prognosis, and you will do worse for the long term. So please try and avoid those exercises. And that was pelvic tucks. So flattening the lordosis, you can see what that does to the spine. And it was knee hugs, which involves bringing your knee right up to your chest, and again doing the same thing a bit more aggressively. The reason they do those is because they're on the NHS website.
I think you're going to need to repeat my questions.
Yeah.
Joe's asked here about reps. When progressing the strengthening exercise, do you recommend keeping the rep set? E.g., do 20, or is there a benefit of doing 30 reps?
So the question there was more about repetitions. I think there's a bit of a cap off as to what's necessary. So when you're starting out with an exercise, maybe doing a few more repetitions up in the 20s and 30s might actually be appropriate for you, especially if you're sort of a phase 1 or phase 2 person. But I think you're better placed working through what we normally recommend is 10 or 15 reps. And if you're able to do what we would recommend as a phase 2 workout in 15 reps in a reasonable amount of time, and we can go into that more details later on. But if you're able to do those workouts, 10, 15 reps of your necessary sets, we normally recommend 3 and then 5 sets, then you really should consider moving on to something with resistance bands or additional weight. Because if you're able to do 20, 30, 40, 50 reps and not really be struggling, you're doing the wrong exercises. They're going to be too easy for you. You need to move on to something where you can employ resistance through bands or weights or kettlebells to allow yourself to actually move up and progress. That's quite important.
Okay, and Karen has asked, would a person without back pain skip straight to phase 3, or is there a benefit to learning the lesson?
I think if you don't have back pain and you're just looking for a really good workout that is safe for your back, maybe you've had it in the past, then definitely dabbling for maybe a week in phase 2, but very, very swiftly moving on to the phase 3, because the phase 3 is more of a fun workout. You're using bands. You're strengthening your body up. You've got a very, very extensive room for progression, building up the resistance with those bands. You can get the muscular workout that's safe for your back and protecting it for the long term, whilst also actually getting a cardiovascular workout. So I'd say phase 3 would be definitely for you. You might want to try some of the phase 2 exercises just first, because they might reveal some weaknesses. Sometimes a lot of people will not have back pain until they do. And it's only when they do that they realize, oh, this was weak, that wasn't working, and that was stiff. And you've just kind of been carrying those risk factors, so to speak, without being aware of it. That's quite important to bear in mind as well.
Okay, just one last question about young women. I think it probably applies to young men as well. Just speaking to my friends, younger women in their 30s are getting more back pain now because they've been home. Why is that?
I think, and this might be a broad brush application, but the question there was about why is sort of young women in their sort of 20s and 30s getting a little bit more back pain right now. And I suppose there's two kettles of fish. Number one is that you're just not very active. Generally speaking, apart from a select group of people, women tend to have a little bit less muscle mass than men. They tend to be less inclined to go in the gym and lift weights and that sort of stuff. So you've got less to lose. And when we go through a period of extensive inactivity, our muscles start to waste. They start to degrade. They start to hypertrophy, which means they get smaller. And the little stability that was being maintained by your normal day-to-day activity has started to decline. So then you're moving back out into society. We're moving around a little bit more now. In England, anyway, we've got unlimited exercise, which is awesome. outdoor exercise, but you've lost some of that level of muscular support that was there, and what was there wasn't necessarily adequate, or it wasn't enough to leave you safe. So if you've only got a little bit, it's kind of like if you had a small bank account beforehand, you're going to be really struggling because you didn't have much to lose. Well, that's the same thing with this group of people anyway. They tend to not do that much in the way of weights. So when you do lose it through inactivity, you lose it very quickly. The guys that are going in the gym that are doing a lot of weights and had excess unnecessary muscle bulk, they may not like that they've lost it, but they're not going to be vulnerable afterwards as much as the girls or all guys that didn't have much muscle mass to lose. And that's why you might, if this is you and you're maybe a more slender lady or a slender guy, and you don't do a lot of physical exercise normally, this even lower level of physical activity may start to reveal a few cracks in the sort of foundations, and really you want to work on that as quickly as possible before it gets out of hand.
Okay, great. Alex has asked a really good question here on YouTube.
Okay.
I'm fairly flexible and used to Pilates. I did overdo it in the garden 4 weeks ago. I can only stand pain-free for about 10 to 15 minutes. Should I restrict myself?
If you can stand pain-free, if you can walk, see how that is. But if you've been good up until 4 weeks ago, it might be worth dabbling. What we're actually, if you're in the Backshape membership, you'll see that we're going to be releasing some extra videos that we shot to answer just these sorts of questions over the next week. But essentially, if you're in phase 1, you might actually find a hybrid of phase 1 and phase 2 to be effective. So you can try those exercises. If you are able to stand, if it's tolerable to start those phase 2 exercises, then I definitely would start them tentatively. Again, if you do, for example, phase 1 in the morning, the phase 2 workout in the middle of the day, and then the phase 1 workout in the evening again, that's a nice transition. You keep up with the icing. You don't push yourself too hard on those reps. You'll notice that a lot of the phase 2 exercises are going to be 10 reps to start with. If you can only do 3 or 5, that's worthwhile doing. If you've been an otherwise active person up until recently, it really would be worth starting to introduce those exercises really as soon as it's manageable. We've obviously put the cutoff at 10 to 15 minutes, but it sounds like you're in that category. So if you can stand for 10 to 15 minutes, I'd look to doing those exercises because that allows you to stand with better form and therefore decreases the vulnerability in your back. And you're going to want to get out to do gardening as soon as possible, I suspect, especially with the weather as it is right now. So starting that strengthening progress tentatively is going to be the right thing to do.
So Alex should move into phase 2.
Yeah, I think you should move into phase 2, tentatively, as I've just discussed. And if you do, stay tuned for those videos on the membership site and in the Facebook group, because we're going to be releasing those later this week.
Okay, great. And Kate on YouTube has asked, I'm not sure which phase I'm in, as I can walk for a long time, but bending, lifting, and getting up from sitting are all agonizing. Is this phase 3?
No, that would be phase 2. Yeah, for Kate, you've said that you're able to walk for long periods, but any sort of physically arduous activity like bending, lifting, getting up is actually causing you a lot of trouble. For you, I would definitely, and anyone like Kate, I would definitely start at the phase 1 stroke phase 2. You might want to just dabble with those phase 1 exercises for a day or so, but I'd swiftly, very, very swiftly start phase 2 exercises and start them again tentatively. It's important to note that with these sorts of phase 2 exercises that we normally recommend, if you do them with bad technique, they will be ridiculously easy. Focus on the technique for around about 2 or 3 days until you feel like you've got it down. Some people it takes a week or so. Some people it doesn't. It takes a couple of days, and then really start pushing it, and that should really help you with avoiding those symptoms when you're getting up and getting down. And you may want to still, even though you're able to walk lots, if getting out of chairs and doing some of those choice movements is actually really challenging, you may still find it beneficial to just tag on an extra phase 1 workout, because it takes you like 15 minutes to do that workout. Just tagging it on at the end or the start of the day can actually be really, really helpful. And I'd also pay attention. I definitely go through the phase 1 material, because in the membership site, people often just jump straight to the workouts and they don't look at that base information. It's about 4 or 5 lessons there in the phase 1 and 3 or 4 in the phase 2. They skip those lessons and then you're still making those mistakes. So I definitely look through those lessons or just quickly watch them. They're only short videos, but it'll just give you that understanding so that the other things that you're doing on a daily basis, like the sitting, etc., can be done more effectively. And if sitting is a problem for you, then I definitely also check out, we did a live stream a couple of weeks ago on sitting positions and a few little techniques you can use to adjust your sitting position, one of which using a towel in your lower back to support it. But that can actually be done badly. So go ahead and watch that YouTube live. Just skip through it. You can fast forward to the bit where we've got the pictures on the screen, and just make sure you're not doing yourself any disservices unwittingly. Awesome. Hope that was helpful. Any other questions?
No, that's it.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys found today's live stream helpful. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about which are going to be the best exercises for your stage of back pain. As always, if you do find these videos useful, please do consider... Oh, we got a question?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wearing my socks is becoming quite a task.
Putting them on, okay.
Yeah, putting them on. Shall I persevere or continue sitting down?
So this question is about, I'm assuming putting on the socks is quite challenging. So. That would indicate that there is a good bit of trouble or inflammation still in the back. Maybe there's a lack of mobility in the hips, which is why it's aggravating the back each time you bend this. So what quite commonly happens is in the lower back, we've got these nerves down here and they control all of these muscles down here. So even if there was before a little bit of stiffness in the hamstrings, for example, it's now got even more stiffness. So as soon as you lift this up to put your socks on, your back rounds and that irritates the lumbar spine. Two things. Number one, you definitely need to be doing the phase 1 exercises if it's that difficult. Unless, like Kate, you're actually able to do a lot of walking, it's just these little tasks that are bothering you, then you may really need to consider moving into phase 2 a little bit faster. But that's the first one. And then we need to stretch these hamstrings out. We need to get a little bit more flexibility. But you have to make sure you're stretching them in a safe way. It's no good bending down to touch your toes because that's going to make you worse. You have to isolate the hamstrings. And again, there are these same errors that a lot of people fall into, these same categories that a lot of people fall into. And if you can just focus on, watch some of the videos that we've put out, for example, on the hamstring stretch, you'll be able to avoid getting caught out here. But I definitely say for you, go to phase 1, start those exercises, be more mindful of the way in which you're using your body, and you're probably going to need to work on some of those stretches as well to improve the hip flexibility in the short term, so your body can start healing and then move into the phase 2 stuff. So Lars, if you're watching this right now and you haven't joined the membership site, it's free to join the basic version. You have phase 1 access, obviously phase 2 and any other stuff is part of the premium membership. So you're welcome to join that if you find it useful. We're sure you will. And as always, thanks for joining us on today's live stream. If you do find these videos useful, then please do consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you know next time we go live. We go live every single weekday. Sometimes the times vary because of us seeing patients or doing virtual consultations, etc. So please do bear with us. We'll always put the live stream out so you know at least a couple of hours beforehand, normally a day beforehand, what time it's going to be. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow with another live stream. Have a great day and enjoy the sunshine.